My name is Doug Mayo. I'm the County Extension Director in Jackson County, Florida. And I'm out today at the North Florida Research and Education Center near Marianna with Dr. Cheryl Mackowiak, who's a soil scientist. And she's done an interesting demonstration comparing Bahiagrass at the fall of the year, and shows us some options of things that producers might be interested in. It could be a field that your neighbor has offered you that has been sitting out all summer, or perhaps you had a fence that was torn up and you just got it repaired. You've got grass that's grown up all summer long, never been cut, never been fertilized. What can you do with it to make it, whether it's for grazing or for hay, to make improvements? The plot I'm standing in has simply been mowed 6 weeks ago. So one of the things you can do that's very inexpensive to improve forage quality is simply to reduce maturity. The original plot that had not been grazed or cut for hay yielded about 1,500 pounds. When we mowed it off and waited 6 weeks, we dropped the yield to about 800 pounds, but we went from below 5% protein to 6% protein, which is marginal for hay production, but certainly a significant improvement for grazing. So just mowing the grass and allowing it to regrow with less mature plants there improve the forage quality, whether it's utilized for hay or grazing. The next thing we looked at was, what if we mowed it off and fertilized? And the plot to your right received 30 pounds of nitrogen after it was mowed off 6 weeks ago. The plot to your left is the one that simply was mowed. And by adding the combination, we got the yield back up to about 1,500 pounds, very similar to what we had out here when we started, and yet we got 8% protein in this grass. So whether it's being grazed by dry pregnant cows or being made into hay, we've gotten the protein up where it's at least good enough quality. We shouldn't have an issue with intake, and we ought to be able to maintain cows that aren't lactating. Whereas just simply mowing it, we reduced our yield and we only improved the quality. So we went from 6% protein to 8% protein with 30 pounds of nitrogen, and we doubled our yield by just adding a small amount of nitrogen and allowing it to grow for 6 weeks. The next change we made in the two plots, we've added 50 pounds of nitrogen compared to 30 pounds of nitrogen. So same exercise, mowed it 6 weeks ago and fertilized, but this plot got 30, this plot got 50 pounds per acre. In this case, we only boosted the yield 25%, but the big difference is we go from 8% protein to 10% protein. And now we've got a forage quality that's at the level that we might even consider making hay if we're short on hay production. And we've got enough protein in there that cows that are pregnant should be adequate, and even cows with calves at side would just need a minimal boost of protein supplementation. But 50 pounds is typically the recommended minimum rate to make hay, and you can see the difference over a 6 week period of growth between 30 and 50. In our final comparison, we have a plot that received 50 pounds of nitrogen, which is University of Florida's standard recommendation for pastures, versus 80 pounds of nitrogen, which is kind of the standard recommendation for hay production. But remember, this demonstration was done at the 1st of August, and we're here the 3rd week of September. This time of year, grass is growing slower, the days are shorter. So in this case, we didn't get a huge yield response. We only saw about a 10% improvement in total yield from comparing these two plots, and we didn't really see an increase in protein. So when you get later in the year, you get less response from your fertilizer. So in this case, as we've compared all these different scenarios, the real take-home message is, if you've got grass that's been out there all summer and you're looking at it in the first week of August, you need to employ some kind of management to improve the quality. The original grass was below 5% protein. We're worried about intake. It certainly wouldn't be good for hay production, and simply mowing it off improved the quality enough that we should be able to graze. If we add 30 or 50 pounds of nitrogen, we can really boost the performance of that pasture to the point we have options. We could make hay or we could graze it, and if we're just grazing with dry pregnant cows, have enough nutrition to supply them what they need. Or if we've got young cattle or lactating cows, would need a little protein supplementation. But for a small investment in nitrogen, we can take something that was really unusable and generate a forage that has adequate quality for cattle production.
So beyond the forage production and the animal performance, we also need to consider the environmental impact. We're in a part of the state where we have groundwater quality problems, especially with nitrates. And so what happens when we put these different rates of nitrogen on these Bahiagrass plots? When we put no nitrogen on as fertilizer, we're taking up nitrogen, so that nitrogen is coming from the ground that's been there before. And so that's basically 100% efficient in terms of nitrogen application. If we add 30 to 50 pounds of nitrogen, now we're up to 70% efficient in terms of how much fertilizer we put on and how much the plants took up. 70 to 85% is very good efficiency. Plants are never 100%. And so we're basically probably using pretty much everything we applied. What happened when we went to the 80 pounds of nitrogen? We did not see that much increase in yield or quality, so that means about 50% of that nitrogen is not in the plant. Now we're in a position where we're probably, if those plants can't take up that nitrogen later, and we're at the end of the season, so it's unlikely they'll do much more to uptake. If we get a big rain, we're in the hurricane season, end of the summer, 2 to 3 inches of rain a few times is going to put that nitrogen below the root zone, and then eventually it could probably go into the groundwater. So that's another consideration, especially in sensitive areas, to not over-apply, plus you're basically paying for something you're not utilizing.